milk?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You watch and see. A little bit of engineering and Scottish ingenuity, quite simple. We used to have 11 locks joining the canals. When we get to the top on the way back, I'll show you where they used to be joined. And those locks split the difference of about 110 feet between the canals. But today, we do it this way, so instead of taking 6 or 7 hours to do a locking, we're effectively going to do the same journey in about 5 minutes. In the old days, of course, we fed that system from the top canal with water, and in the summertime, when water levels were low, it could easily take you 6 or 7 hours to do the trip. The problem then, of course, was you were using over 50,000 tonnes of water. So, quick question. Any idea how much water we're using today? None, you're right, sir, because when we closed the gates at the back of us, we basically formed a box. We're taking our own water up with us, and we'll bring our own water back down, so we're not using any. And if we do want to move water levels about the basin or from one canal to another, we can actually do that by the movement of the wheel itself acting like a giant pump. But the key word here above everything else is balance. That's why it doesn't really matter the fact we've got 2 boats in this gondola. I suspect the combined weight of this boat and the narrow boat next to us is probably something like 65, 70 tonnes. It doesn't matter if there's a boat in the other gondola or completely empty. The 2 gondolas will always weigh the same. And the reason for that is very straightforward. Any boat that comes in pushes its own weight of water out. That's why we're always in perfect balance, And that's why at the moment we're moving about 1,800 tons of steel and water on the equivalent of about half a dozen electric kettles. Seriously. In that centre column we've got 10 hydroelectric motors. We use 8 to turn the wheel and 2 of them act like brakes, just to slow us down when we get near the top. So we're about just over halfway up now. Yeah. If you're sitting on one side of the boat, don't worry, because when we come back you'll be sitting on the other side, turning round. But as I say, when we come back to the top gondola, hopefully there will be nobody else there, and I will point out a number of things we can see today. Nice and smooth, isn't it? Very, very, very simple idea, but it's the engineering and the bits you don't see that are the clever bits. This, of course, is the world's only rotating boat lift, designed and engineered here in Scotland. So we're about 90% of the way there now. Very shortly we'll line up with the top aqueduct. What will happen then is we're going to line everything up by laser underneath that you can't see. We're going to put in 2 huge big locking pins to hold everything together, nice and solid. Then we're going to push out a watertight seal from the concrete side there and form a watertight seal right round the gates in front of us. It's a bit like the bellows on an accordion, yeah? Once we've done that, we'll fill the gap in between the gates with water until all the water levels are exactly the same. We're actually allowed about a difference of 4 millimetres as a maximum. Once that's done, all the pressure is off and the gates will open. One gate will drop away from us, the other gate will drop towards us, a bit like the pages of a book, and they'll lie down flat on the base of the canal. And once that's done, the little red traffic light you can see across there on the right will turn to green and we'll be good to go. But because we're going to turn at the end, once we're ready to go, I'm going to send this chap out with the narrow boat first, okay? Right, just while we're waiting on the gates, if you look ahead, you'll see a series of arches going down the canal, yeah? And at the last arch, can you see how the 2 sides of the canal come in and it's a very narrow gap? Yeah? It is a narrow gap because like literally got the width of one hand to put this boat through, okay? So if you're at the front, you did remember the brown trousers? I do hope. I'll try not to bump you, but notice the word try. That's there for 2 reasons. It's called the pinch point, and it's there so we can seal the canal off at that point and drain the whole thing if we want to work on the wheel. But it's also a physical measuring gauge. And the reason for that is that some places on the top canal are shallower and narrower than the bottom canal. So, if you can get your boat through that gap, then in theory you can go all the way to Edinburgh by boat. If you don't fit through there, you're not going any further because there are places you might get stuck. Did anybody see the BBC programmes with Timothy West, Prunella Scales? Yeah. He was using a narrow boat. Now a narrow boat is exactly half the width of the boat we're sitting on today. So if you imagine standing right in the middle of the boat, that's the width of the boat he was using. He hit that 4 times. I ended up taking the boat off him and they ended it out the program. He also managed to lose Prunella up in the Union Canal and I ended up putting her back on and taking the boat off him at that point. So it's all not what you see on the TV, I have to tell you. I will try not to bump you, but I'm not going to promise you that, okay? Right, we're just about ready to go. We'll send this chap off first and then Brian will put on the audio. And when we get back to this point, assuming I can stop the boat, we'll come back and talk to you then.
For the next half an hour or so, we'll be up here 27 metres above our starting point on the Forth and Clyde Canal. We're now moving at 4 miles an hour over the reinforced concrete aqueduct. There's just over 100 metres between here and the tunnel, dead ahead of us. We'll go right through that and turn around before heading back and taking a look at the view that's right behind you now. You might have noticed that there are 2 tourist boats in service at the Falkirk Wheel, each with slightly strange names. Archimedes and Antonine. Did you see which one you are on today when you got on? Those special names were chosen for a reason. They're both important parts of the wheel's identity. First, Archimedes. He was a scholar and mathematician in ancient Greece who discovered something that's very important for the operation of the wheel.
Any floating object displaces its own weight of fluid.
Okay, that might need a bit of explanation. Archimedes' principle says that when an object is placed in water, for example the boat you are sitting in now, it displaces its exact own weight in water. The amount of water that moves out of the way to make room for us is equal in weight to the boat itself. That might sound quite simple, but it's actually really important for the smooth operation of the Falkirk wheel. Each gondola, that's the big tub of water we just travelled up in, holds 250 tonnes of water. When our boat sailed in, we pushed about 60 tonnes of water. That is the weight of the boat and its fuel and all the people in it, out meaning that the gondola then had 190 tonnes of water and 60 tonnes of boat in it. So the contents of the gondola still weigh 250 tonnes. The clever part is that the other gondola will also weigh exactly 250 tonnes as well. We're evenly balanced with them, and that means that it only takes a tiny bit of energy to get us moving around the central core of the wheel. We're balancing each other out. So while you might think it would take a lot of energy to lift 250 tonnes of steel, water, boat and even you up the 27 metres we just came, it actually took just a small push. About the same amount of energy as boiling 8 electric kettles. That's enough for a cup of tea, each for everyone on the boat. We haven't got time for a cuppa now, but you can get one down at the visitor centre afterwards while you watch the wheel going round again. Another really clever part of the wheel are the cogs. You can't see them as they're inside the workings, but these huge jagged wheels and sensors stop us from tipping over as we move up and down around the wheel. When the designers were putting the plans for the Falkirk wheel together, they were confident it would work on paper, but they weren't exactly sure. This is the first rotating boat lift in the world after all. So to test their theory out, they built a small-scale model out of Lego to see how it went. Fortunately, the principle worked and the design was commissioned. As we get close to the tunnel ahead, you'll note that we're in a rather charming landscape. At some times of the year, the pool to your left is home to herons. The canal system stretching across Scotland is home to over 30 varieties of aquatic plants, 15 species of mollusk, over 30 types of water flea, and even freshwater sponges. Plus the ducks and swans. It's been known for fish to swim into the gondola at the bottom and travel up to the Union Canal with us. Of course, they displace their own weight too. And there are footpaths here as well, leading up into the woods. You can walk along these later if you like. Side of the boat as we enter the tunnel, you'll see a sign reading Rough Castle Tunnel. A castle? You can't see a castle near here. That's because we're about to travel underneath it. Well, almost. There's a Roman castle fort on the hill really quite close by. It was placed there around the year 143 AD as part of a network of military bases built by the Romans to defend the area. These forts were linked by a wall, running right the way across the width of Scotland. For a lot of its distance, this system of forts and walls follows the rough route of the Forth and Clyde Canal, linking the east and west sides of the country. Only the canals were designed to make transport and communication across the country easier. The castle forts were built by the military to control people and keep them out of the northern border of what was then the Roman Empire. Now you'll almost certainly be aware of another Roman emperor, best known for his wall in northern England. The wall above you now wasn't built by Hadrian though. It was constructed during the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius. It's known as the Antonine Wall, and that's the name of our other boat, Antonine. Skip forward 1600 years, and this landscape, instead of being a conflict zone, was one of rapid industrial expansion. The Forth and Clyde Canal, that's the one behind us at the bottom of the lift, was started in the 1770s and followed the route originally surveyed by John Smeaton. It opened in 1790 and quickly became one of the most important trading and transport links across Scotland. It was the world's first sea-to-sea ship canal, joining the River Clyde and Glasgow in the west to the River Forth and the North Sea in the east. And the addition of the Union Canal, that's the one we're sailing on now, in 1822 meant Glasgow and Edinburgh were linked by waterways. This all meant that unprecedented amounts of trade were now possible not only between Glasgow and Edinburgh, but also with the rest of Northern Europe and the world. In the 1830s, 200,000 people each year travelled between the two cities. One operator offered
express service in just 7 hours on swift passenger boats.
There was, apparently, a sign projecting from the front of the boat that would cut through the tow ropes of any slow-moving vessels that refused to give way. Getting between the two canals still required the use of a lock system though. A few kilometres to the east of here, there was a flight of 11 canal locks with a fall of just over 3 metres each. Each had to fill with water in turn to raise traffic up to the Union Canal so it could travel on to Edinburgh. For a time, this was the golden age of the canal. and waterways were almost the motorways of the day. But with the rise of the railways, the decline of the canals was almost inevitable. The closing of Grangemouth docks to the east of here as a security measure during the First World War heralded the start of the end, and by the 1960s the canals were left abandoned, unused and falling into disrepair. As we emerge out of the tunnel, you'll notice that we're in a much different landscape now. More intimate, and certainly not quite such grand views as on the other side. When we've turned around and gone back through the tunnel, you'll appreciate the views from there, looking out over central Scotland from a scenic vantage point. But for a moment, enjoy the canal side setting. The land around here is stunning and ready for exploration.